£106.8 million. 29 points. Chelsea have spent £106.8 million on one player, yet are still down in 10th place with just 29 points. The game is well and truly gone. That being said though, it's not just any player they've just signed, it's World Cup winner Enzo Fernandez. About a month ago, I made a video about how Chelsea's transfer strategy is going to bring them back to the top of world football. With the likes of Mudryk, Felix and Fernandez all coming in since that video, they might just be a whole lot closer to proving me right. This is why I think Enzo Fernandez and Chelsea's other signings will take the Blues back to the summit of world football. Rewind to the start of May last year, and Todd Boehly had finalised a deal to take over Chelsea Football Club, with Abramovich being forced to sell it due to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The American inherited a squad in absolute shambles at Stamford Bridge, with years of poor business in the transfer windows and many stars having left, seeing them drop from Champions League winners in 2021 to a side with just one win from 5 and closer to finishing 7th and top of the league. And with barely 20 first-team players, Chelsea had to spend in the summer, with nearly £300 million of talent coming into the club, as the side enjoyed a rocky start to the season before Thomas Tuchel was sacked. Graham Potter then took over at the club after a few impressive years at Brighton had been enough to catch the eye of Todd Boehly, who'd planned on bringing him in for the long term ever since he bought the club back in May. And it wouldn't take long for the new manager to get them going, where after just a few games in charge he'd guided them up to 4th in the table and top of their Champions League group. But then the tide turned. No wins in the final 5 games before the World Cup saw them drop down to 8th, with huge holes in the squad becoming clear. It was just a couple years previously when Tuchel had guided the squad in its last legs to the Champions League, but with the likes of Kante now injured and Jorginho no longer at the same level he'd been a couple years ago, their midfield looked weak. Partnered with this, the team couldn't buy a goal, with not a single player having scored more than 3 goals in the league and the side lacking any real creativity. As well as this, they had a poor defence, with a 38-year-old Thiago Silva being the only centre-back at the club from Chelsea's Champions League success about 18 months previously. Now going into January, Potter had made the areas he wanted covered clear, and so he saw the likes of Mudryk, Felix, Madueke, Badiashile and so on being signed, before with just moments left of the transfer window, Chelsea had finally managed to get a midfielder in, Enzo Fernandez. This is where the video shifts, as the Argentine became the most expensive signing in British football history, and one big question being asked again and again. What will Fernandez actually bring to Stamford Bridge? And the answer to that is a lot. When playing in a deeper role, Fernandez possesses a few unique and interesting qualities, which I think is something to look out for when watching him this season. Firstly, at around 5'10", he's far from the tallest player on the pitch, and so naturally is not the greatest at aerial duels. However, his lack of aerial dominance is more than made up for when the ball is on the ground. Fernandez is very agile and aggressive, allowing him to dominate midfield duels. His upper body strength is good, however it's his ability to use his lower half that makes him so special in my opinion. Without going too far in depth, in the same way that Hazard used his hips and Wan-Bissaka uses his long legs to win duels, Enzo Fernandez does a very similar thing, making him very hard to dispossess once he's won the ball back, as well as being very hard to beat in a one-on-one. As you'll notice, he's often able to wrap his legs around players to reach the ball without giving away a foul. Not only this, but he's very aggressive in pressing, which creates his biggest pros and cons when defending. Whilst being smart in pressing passing lanes and forcing opposition players into traps, he's also sometimes overly aggressive when defending transitions, which can sometimes lead to him getting beaten and watching as the ball passes him by. So what does all of this mean for Chelsea right now? Well, with Kante and Zakaria both being missing through injury and Reece James now back, Enzo Fernandez will likely be playing a more defensive role at first, shielding the defence but also covering wider areas, allowing Chelsea's fullbacks to push further forward, giving them more options in attacking phases of play. That also brings me on to my next point, which is what he'll bring to Chelsea's attack. In recent weeks, Chelsea have struggled massively in scoring goals, with only 7 teams in the entire league having put the ball in the back of the net less often than them, with the side massively lacking a progressive passer who's able to play vertical line-breaking passes to put them in behind the opposition. Now take a look at this graph and tell me what Enzo's best attribute is. Oh yeah, and if the stats aren't enough for you, then just take a look at a quick highlight reel of his on YouTube and his long passing ability will stand out instantly. When playing out from the back, Fernandez tends to drop into one of the wider areas, creating a 3 at the back, which then pushes a fullback further up the pitch, where I think we'll see our main issue, as on the left hand side this could very well get in the way of Mudryk. The Ukrainian likes to receive the ball deep on the touchline and then drive with it up the pitch onto the inside channels, where if a fullback was then pushed into this zone, we may start to see issues arise. Although, luckily enough, Fernandez does have another trait which can combat this, in that he loves to spray quick passes with the outside of his right foot, which will progress play to a runner on the left hand side, beating the defender before curling more centrally for the wingers to latch onto, naturally pushing them into a more dangerous zone. Now, I don't want to bombard you too much with analysis, so the last thing I'll bring up for now is that Fernandez is also incredible at penetrative passes to break down low blocks, an issue Chelsea have been unable to deal with this season. This, alongside his vast skill set, makes him a great option further up the pitch for Chelsea, allowing them to use various formations in different games, another thing we know Potter loves to do. Finally, we can now move on to the third big section of this video, which is how I think Chelsea should use Enzo. In the short term, I think he'll be used in a deeper role to aid them defensively, but to also force opponents into putting more men forwards to try suffocate him centrally, as well as to make use of his line-breaking passes, making it a lot harder for teams to sit deep against them. However, once Kante and Zakaria are back, Enzo will likely move forwards, able to play in a more free role, which is when I think his relationship with Kai Havertz and Raheem Sterling will blossom. As an 8, his occasional over-aggressiveness in the press can be countered by a deeper line midfielder, whilst also leaving him able to create and dominate attacking transitions, where Chelsea's fast and smart attackers will make runs in behind defenders. Before Enzo came in, Chelsea had been missing a player who can break vertical lines from deep as well as higher up the pitch in a low block, and so he will quickly become the most important player for them in both phases of attacking play. And with Sterling being a born winner and Havertz having won the Champions League 2 years ago, could we see the signing of Enzo Fernandez transform the Blues back into European champions? Now, before I answer that question, I just want to do two things. Firstly being that I need to ask you something. If you're watching this video right now, please make sure you're subscribed to the channel. As you can see from our recent vids, there are more people watching this video that are not subscribed to the channel than people who are actually subscribed. So please just sub right now, as it helps push our content out to more people and means you'll never miss an upload. I'll even give you a few seconds to subscribe right now without missing any of the video. Alright, that should be enough time. So on to the next thing, which is to look at some of the behind the scenes movement at Chelsea following the arrival of Boehly last year. We saw the likes of Marina Granovskaya and Petr Cech being amongst those kicked out of their roles at the club following years of underperformance. Poor transfers and scouting had led to a huge drop off in performance and, more importantly, consistency since the end of Conte's first season in charge in 2017. Now, I've already covered the fall of the club in my first video, so I'll save everyone who's seen that video the time and just summarise what I said. This is Chelsea's transfers before 2017. And this is Chelsea's transfers after 2017. As you can see from this very detailed graph, transfers got a lot worse towards the end of Roman's reign at the club. But seriously, just take a look at how detailed that graph is. Now, it doesn't take a genius to work out that once Boehly came into the club, he had to change things about their recruitment strategy and, more importantly, how to get the most out of assets they already have. Of course, on the face of things, it didn't look like Chelsea were in a bad position in terms of performances when Tuchel was fired. But if you look below the surface, you can see a world of issues. For starters, they had an ageing squad and a lack of quality, with many players having left the club following the conclusion of the 21-22 season. Now, if you take a look at their starting 11 from the Champions League final just over a year previously, you can see that just 4 players are under the age of 30 and still at the club, proving that the brilliance of Tuchel and getting the most out of his side may have just been a curse more than a blessing. For years, we've seen world-class talent come through Cobham, however very few have actually been able to develop at Chelsea. And so, as I mentioned earlier, Boehly used a bad start to sack Tuchel and looked to a young manager with history of developing youth who could transform an ageing squad back into one which can battle for major glory. Not only this, but Boehly admired the whole system at Brighton, and so thought, well, if they're signing good young players, why don't we just get the guy who finds them? And so in came Paul Winstanley, who's now in charge of scouting and transfers at Chelsea. Alongside this, Boehly has fired and replaced a load of people at the club in order to make them as sustainable as possible for the future, whilst he also spent a lot of money in their present to revitalise what was a dying squad. And now, focusing back onto Potter and Winstanley, by hiring 2 people who've worked under each other elsewhere and succeeded, Boehly has 2 potential gems at his disposal who can transform this squad. Potter's found the problems in his squad, and Winstanley solved them. And none of these solutions have the potential to be quite as great as Enzo Fernandez. In 2021, Chelsea's ageing midfield played an absolutely pivotal role in carrying the side through to being champions of Europe. And now, in 2023, I'm not scared to answer the question I asked earlier, which was, could we see the signing of Enzo Fernandez transform the Blues back into European champions? And in my opinion, the answer to that is yes. It may not be this year, next year, or even the year after that, but I think Enzo Fernandez will be the man to glue all of the signings Chelsea have made together and create an absolute monster of a team. I ended my last video by saying, mark my words, Liverpool will be back. However, if Enzo Fernandez can turn this season around for Chelsea, had the glory days ever even left Stamford Bridge? Thanks for watching, please like and subscribe if you're new, and also follow my socials, link in the description. To be fair, this was a bit of a weird video, an analytical documentary weird mix thing, but if you enjoyed it I'll try to do some more like it in the near future, so let me know in the comments if I should. But most importantly though, thanks for watching and enjoy your day.